Show up at the airport in 2026 with the same carry-on habits you had last year, and there's a real chance you get pulled aside, fees added, or your bag gets gate-checked right in front of everyone in line behind you. TSA and the airlines have quietly rolled out a wave of changes this year. New ID requirements, new scanning technology, stricter battery rules, and airlines finally cracking down on carry-on sizes they used to ignore. None of this is rumor. It's happening at checkpoints right now. Let's break down 6 carry-on rules for 2026 you need to know before your next flight, counting down to the one mistake that catches the most travelers off guard. 6. Airlines are finally weighing and measuring your carry-on. Let's start with number 6, and this one is going to sting for a lot of frequent flyers who've spent years quietly bending the rules. Airlines are actually enforcing carry-on size and weight limits now, in a way they simply didn't bother with before. Here's the backstory. Technically, TSA has never set a carry-on size or weight limit at all. That's always been up to each individual airline to decide and enforce. For years, that enforcement was inconsistent at best. Plenty of travelers got away with rolling boards that were a little too big, or backpacks stuffed so full they barely zipped, because gate agents simply didn't have the time or the mandate to check every single bag boarding a flight. That era appears to be ending in 2026. Airlines, especially budget carriers, have started weighing carry-ons far more often and checking dimensions with noticeably more scrutiny than in years past. Most major US airlines still cap carry-on dimensions somewhere around 22 by 14 by 9 inches, including any wheels or handles sticking out from the main body of the bag. But budget airlines have historically enforced stricter limits. And in 2026, they're actually holding travelers to them at the gate rather than just printing the rule on a website nobody reads. If your bag doesn't fit the sizer at the gate, you're not just getting a stern look anymore, you're getting checked, and gate check fees in 2026 are frequently running higher than a standard checked bag fee. You could have paid at the counter for a fraction of the cost. Weight is the newer wrinkle here, and it's catching people completely off guard. TSA itself doesn't weigh your carry-on, but a growing number of airlines are adding their own weight limits and actually enforcing them with gate-side scales, something that used to be almost exclusively a European and international travel concern. Some airlines are even combining the weight of your personal item and your main carry-on into a single limit, so stuffing your laptop bag to compensate for an overweight suitcase doesn't necessarily get you out of trouble the way it might have in the past. There's also a quieter crackdown happening around personal items specifically. Airlines are increasingly strict about what actually counts as a personal item versus a second carry-on in disguise. A laptop bag, small backpack, purse, briefcase, or a small camera bag are the classics that count. But the rule that's tightening up in 2026 is simple. If it doesn't fully disappear under the seat in front of you, it's not a personal item anymore, and gate agents are being told to treat it that way rather than waving it through out of convenience. The fix here is straightforward, but requires actually doing it before you get to the airport rather than hoping for the best. Measure your actual bag, not the one you assume is compliant. Weigh it on a home scale before you leave the house, and check your specific airline's current limits rather than relying on memory from your last trip a year or two ago. That newly enforced gap between what used to slide and what gets caught now is exactly why this rule earns the number 6 spot. 5. Real ID is now mandatory. No exceptions without a fee. Number 5 is less about your bag and more about what happens before you even get to the checkpoint. Real ID enforcement is now fully active, and showing up without one is going to cost you. As of February 1st, 2026, TSA fully enforces Real ID requirements for domestic flights. If your driver's license doesn't have that little star marking it as Real ID compliant, and you don't have a valid passport as a backup, you can no longer just talk your way through security the way travelers sometimes managed in years past during the long, repeatedly delayed rollout of this rule. Now, if you show up without acceptable identification, you're required to pay a $45 fee to use TSA's Confirm ID verification system, which allows officers to confirm your identity through alternate means. That clearance is only valid for 10 days, meaning frequent flyers without a real ID can't just pay once and forget about it. You'll be paying that $45 fee again and again every time you fly without updating your ID. This matters enormously for anyone who's been putting off updating their license, and honestly, a lot of people have been putting it off for years, since this requirement has been delayed and pushed back multiple times since it was first introduced. That history of delays has understandably made a lot of travelers assume it would keep getting pushed back indefinitely. It didn't. It's live now, and airports are enforcing it consistently, rather than treating it as a soft suggestion. The good news is that a passport works just as well as a real ID-compliant license for domestic flights, so if you already travel internationally and keep your passport current, this entire rule might not affect you at all. But if your only form of ID is an older, non-compliant driver's license and you don't have a passport sitting in a drawer somewhere, you're looking at either an unplanned $45 charge at the checkpoint or a genuinely stressful scramble trying to figure out your options while a line builds up behind you. The fix is simple, but it requires advanced planning rather than a same-day fix, since most states require an in-person DMV visit and specific documentation to get a real ID-compliant license issued. Check your license now, before you're standing at a checkpoint with a flight to catch. And if it doesn't have that star, either get it updated well ahead of your next trip or make sure your passport is current and in your bag. That combination of a fully enforced deadline and a real financial penalty for showing up unprepared is exactly why this rule earns the number 5 spot. 4. CT scanners mean you might not need to pull out your laptop or liquids anymore. Sliding into number 4. We've got a genuinely positive change for once. New CT scanning technology means you might finally be able to stop digging your laptop and liquids bag out of your carry-on at the checkpoint. By early 2026, over 90% of major US airport hubs, including massive ones like Atlanta, Los Angeles, JFK, and Chicago O'Hare, have replaced their traditional flat X-ray machines with advanced 3D CT scanners. These machines build a genuine three-dimensional image of everything inside your bag, one that TSA officers can actually rotate a full 360 degrees on their screen to inspect from every angle, rather than relying on the flat, layered, sometimes confusing image a traditional X-ray produces. Because the image is so much more detailed, officers at these upgraded lanes can clearly identify what's inside your bag without you needing to physically remove it first. The practical upside here is real and immediate. At checkpoints equipped with these scanners, you generally don't need to pull your quart-sized liquids bag out of your carry-on anymore, and you don't need to remove your laptop either. That's a genuinely meaningful time saver, especially for anyone who's used to the familiar shuffle of unpacking half their bag into separate bins before it goes through the machine, then repacking everything on the other side while people behind you wait impatiently. But here's the important caveat that a lot of travelers are getting wrong, and it's worth repeating clearly. This does not change the actual 311 liquid rule itself. You still need every liquid container to be 3.4 ounces or under, and all of them still need to fit inside a single quart-size bag. The CT scanner doesn't mean you can suddenly bring a full-size bottle of shampoo through security. It just means you don't have to physically separate that compliant quart bag from the rest of your carry-on before sending it through the machine. Mixing those two things up is an easy mistake, and it's exactly the kind of misunderstanding that leads to travelers still getting flagged and having their bags manually searched, even at an upgraded CT lane. It's also worth noting that not every single checkpoint lane, even at a major hub with CT scanners installed, is guaranteed to be running in this mode, and instructions can genuinely vary lane by lane and airport by airport. The smart move is to always check the signage right at your specific checkpoint rather than assuming based on which airport you're flying through, since assuming wrong can slow you down just as much as not knowing the rule existed at all. That mix of genuine convenience and an easy-to-misunderstand caveat is exactly why this rule earns the number 4 spot. 3. Spare batteries and power banks belong in your carry-on, not checked luggage. Number 3 is a rule that's been quietly tightening for a while now, and it's one that catches a surprising number of travelers off guard. Spare batteries and power banks are required to travel in your carry-on bag, not your checked luggage. This isn't a new rule exactly, but enforcement and awareness around it have both ramped up significantly heading into 2026, largely because of a genuine, well-documented safety concern. Lithium batteries, the kind used in phone chargers, power banks, laptops, and plenty of other everyday electronics carry a real risk of overheating or short-circuiting. If that happens while a bag is sitting in the pressurized cargo hold of an aircraft, buried under a stack of other luggage, there's no crew member nearby to notice smoke or react quickly. If the same failure happens in the cabin, in your carry-on sitting at your feet, or in the overhead bin, it can be spotted and addressed immediately by crew trained specifically for that scenario. That's exactly why the rule exists, and why it's being enforced more consistently now. Spare, uninstalled batteries and portable power banks need to be in the cabin with you, not checked. Damaged batteries, anything swollen, cracked, or visibly compromised, aren't allowed on board at all, in either carry-on or checked luggage, and spare batteries need to be protected from accidentally short-circuiting, typically by keeping them in their original retail packaging, a dedicated battery case, or with the terminals covered by tape. This one trips up more people than you'd expect, mostly because it feels counterintuitive at first. A lot of travelers assume anything electronic or potentially hazardous should go in checked luggage, out of sight and out of the way, when the opposite is actually true here. If you've got a portable charger you use for your phone on long travel days, or spare camera batteries for a trip where you'll be taking a lot of photos, double check that they're packed in your carry-on before you check any bags at the counter, because if they turn up in a checked bag during screening, you're looking at your bag getting pulled, opened and delayed, potentially causing you to miss a tight connection. The straightforward fix is just building the habit of a quick mental checklist before you check any luggage. No loose batteries, no power banks, nothing lithium-based that isn't already installed inside a larger device like a laptop or camera sitting in anything you're about to hand over at the counter. That combination of a genuine safety rationale and a rule that runs against most people's intuition is exactly why it earns the number 3 spot. 2. The 3-1-1 rule isn't gone, but some items are now exempt. Number 2 brings us back to liquids, but with an important nuance that's causing a lot of confusion online right now. The classic 3-1-1 rule is still fully in effect, but a specific list of items has been exempted from it. Let's clear up the confusion first, because there's a lot of misleading information circulating about this. The federal 3-1-1 standard has not changed as a general rule. Each liquid, gel, or aerosol container in your carry-on still needs to be 3.4 ounces or less, and all of them still need to fit into a single quart-size clear bag. That baseline hasn't gone anywhere, and anyone telling you the rule has been scrapped entirely is spreading a misunderstanding that could get your bag pulled for extra screening. What has changed is that TSA has identified specific categories of items that are now exempt from that container size restriction entirely, largely because the advanced CT scanning technology we talked about earlier makes it much easier to verify what's actually inside a larger container without needing it capped at 3.4 ounces. Medically necessary liquids have long fallen into this category. Think prescription medications, baby formula and breast milk, all of which are allowed in reasonable quantities beyond the standard limit, though they still need to be declared to an officer for inspection rather than just quietly packed away and hope to go unnoticed. Beyond the medical exemptions, TSA has expanded a broader list of exempted liquid and gel items that travelers can now bring through security without confining them to tiny travel-size containers, a genuinely helpful change for anyone tired of buying duplicate travel-size toiletries for every single trip. That said, this exemption list is specific, not a blanket exception for any liquid you'd like to bring, and it's worth actually checking the current list before you assume something you're packing qualifies. It's also worth remembering that this expanded exemption list is a US domestic policy, and if your trip involves transiting through an international airport or connecting through a different country's security system, you'll likely need to follow that country's own, often stricter, 3-1-1 standard, regardless of what US rules currently allow. Airlines can also layer their own additional restrictions on top of TSA's baseline rules, so it's genuinely worth a quick check of your specific airline's policy alongside TSA's guidance before you pack, rather than assuming one set of rules covers you everywhere. That gap between the rule technically changed for some items and most people assume it changed for everything is exactly why this one earns the number 2 spot. 1. Powders over 12 ounces will get you pulled for extra screening. And here it is, the number 1 carry-on rule for 2026 that catches more travelers off guard than almost anything else on this list, simply because barely anyone knows it exists. Powders in containers larger than 12 ounces are subject to additional screening, and that additional screening can genuinely slow you down. Here's why. This one deserves the top spot. Most travelers spend all their pre-flight prep energy worrying about liquids, since that's the rule everyone's grown up hearing about since the mid-2000s. Almost nobody thinks twice about powders. Protein powder for a gym trip, powdered baby formula, powdered creamer, seasoning mixes brought home from a trip, cosmetic powders, or any of the dozens of powdery substances that seem completely harmless and rarely cross anyone's mind as a security concern. But TSA has specifically flagged powders over 12 ounces as requiring extra screening precisely because a powder-filled container can be harder for scanning equipment, even the newer CT machines, to definitively clear compared to a clear liquid or a solid object with an obvious recognizable shape. The practical result is that if you're traveling with a large tub of protein powder, a big container of powdered infant formula, or any other bulk powder substance over that 12-ounce threshold, you should expect your bag to get pulled aside for a closer look, potentially involving a physical inspection, a specialized swab test to check for prohibited substances, or simply a longer wait while an officer takes extra time to clear the item. None of this means the powder is prohibited outright. It's not treated the same way a full-size bottle of shampoo over the liquid limit would be, and it's not automatically confiscated. But it absolutely means you should build extra time into your security screening if you know you're traveling with something like this, rather than assuming your normal quick pass through the checkpoint applies. This rule catches an unusually wide range of travelers precisely because powders show up in so many completely ordinary contexts. Gym-goers bringing a supply of protein powder for a work trip, parents traveling internationally with a large tub of formula for a baby who won't tolerate a formula switch mid-trip, home bakers bringing back specialty flour or spice blends from a trip abroad. None of these people are doing anything remotely suspicious, and yet all of them can end up standing to the side of the checkpoint for several extra minutes while their bag gets a closer look, simply because almost nobody thinks to plan around this specific threshold. The fix, if you know you're traveling with a large quantity of any powdery substance, is simply to build extra buffer time into your airport arrival. Keep the container easily accessible near the top of your bag rather than buried at the bottom, and be ready to answer a few quick questions from the officer conducting the additional screening. That combination of genuine surprise and real potential to derail an otherwise smooth trip through security is exactly why this rule takes the #1 spot on our list. And there you have it. 6 carry-on rules for 2026 that are genuinely catching travelers off guard right now, from newly enforced carry-on sizing all the way up to a powder rule almost nobody's heard of. None of these rules are designed to trip you up on purpose, but showing up unprepared for any one of them can turn a routine trip through security into an unnecessarily stressful one or an unexpected fee you weren't planning on. Do yourself a favor before your next flight. Double-check your ID, weigh and measure your actual bag, keep spare batteries in your carry-on, and know exactly what's inside your luggage before you get anywhere near the checkpoint. Let me know in the comments if you've run into any of these rules recently, and if this video helped you avoid a headache at the airport, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe for more travel updates, and I'll see you in the next one.